Bill Ackman, people may remember this guy.
It's funny to call a guy a billionaire investor. Like,
no, he's a billionaire.
But like, that's the thing is like, it didn't like invent anything.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, and like, there's not even a one major like bet or anything that you can say. You're just like, he had a bunch of money and made more money with money.
But when you say investor, it's like when Republicans refer to themselves as taxpayers. It's like, I am providing value, so I am human above humans. Okay?
But of course they don't provide value. They provide money that people could get if we didn't give all these people money and hoard it, and then they take a return on it. Well, that's how they get more money.
I mean, on CNBC, though, it's hard to make that case given the ideological bent of the financial news channel, right?
That's the parasite news.
They have, I mean, Andrew Ross Sorkin here does the best, you know, he's done some good interviews for a financial reporter, right? Based on the exact kind of underlying set of assumptions that Matt outlines there. So Bill Ackman, you'll remember him maybe as the guy who doxed Harvard students who were protesting against Israel committing genocide against the Palestinian people.
I remember him like 10 years ago as the guy who failed to short a pyramid scheme named Herbalife. He lost a lot of money to a pyramid scheme, betting against a pyramid scheme, which is a funny loss to take. Like,
absolutely.
It is
and still a billionaire, though.
And not taking any lessons about the broader economy, given that, scams like Herbalife can continue despite even a heroic individual like Bill Ackman saying it's a joke.
Yeah, and if Elon Musk jumping around like a dipshit, as Tim Walls referred to it, or if hearing Peter Thiel talk didn't already dispel you of the notion that billionaire equals really smart guy, here is Bill Ackman again, the anti-Semitism crusader, defending Donald Trump reportedly liking Hitler and saying he wanted Hitler's generals around him on CNBC.
First of all, you were a longtime Democrat. You've supported Democrats. We talked about this.
I would say I've always been a centrist, but I've supported more Democrats by far than Republicans.
I just want to read you. This is John Kelly, the former chief of staff of Trump. He worked with him directly.
Sure.
And he says that in many cases, I would agree with some of his policies. So you agree with the policy piece of this that I think Trump is presenting. But he says it's very dangerous. It's a dangerous thing to have the wrong person elected in high office. He goes on to say, in his opinion, he believes that Trump meets the definition of a fascist, would govern like a dictator if allowed, and has no understanding of the Constitution or the concept of the rule of law. He goes on to say that Trump had made admiring statements to him about Hitler, you're Jewish and care about Israel, had expressed contempt for disabled veterans, and had characterized those who died on the battlefield for the U.S. as losers and suckers. How do you get your head around that?
One, it's one person stating a series of things, which I don't know whether...
There are 28 people who have worked for the president, not just in close proximity, but in the Oval Office with him, who have come out publicly and expressed things of this sort.
Pause it real quick, Brad. This whole one person thing, there wasn't one person that said like, oh, Obama's reading like Joseph Stalin, like party discipline pamphlets. There's multiple people before this. Trump's ex-wife in divorce papers saying on his bedside table, it's not Mein Kampf, which would be the obvious thing to say as a lie.
Still would be weird.
But it was the collected speeches of Adolf Hitler, which is like something that I don't think she would know about published unless it was actually there on the bedstand table.
It's very specific, and again, these Milley coming out and saying this is very specific in and of itself, and it's been corroborated. But the Trump campaign is going to deny it because there's no audio of it. But I mean, again, like this is the exact right line of questioning I think that he's approaching Ackman with, which is the inherent differentiation between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Because if this dude, Ackman, who again targeted like teenagers at Harvard and tried to use and throw his weight around as an alumni of that school, he took out LED billboard trucks with the faces of the kids, often minority students at Harvard, with their information and drove them around the square at the school. This guy's a deranged lunatic. under the auspices of saying he's combating anti-Semitism. Here, Sorkin is explicitly saying the guy you're supporting, according to, he's citing John Kelly, but it was also the Milley statement, right? Is expressing admiration for Hitler and Hitler's generals. That would be pretty anti-Semitic if put into practice. Here's Ackman defending that.
In close proximity, but in the Oval Office with him,
Sure.
who have come out publicly and expressed things of this sort.
I think
Actually,
Kamala
let's
Harris lost 92% of her staff too. But
That's actually, I think that's a relevant sort of
Hey,
point.
call her
Wait.
Hitler, so-
Kamala Harris not lost 92% of her staff. She had staff turnover. Okay. Did they all leave because she was saying, I love Hitler?
Yeah.
All right, keep going.
2% of her staff too. But
That's actually, I think that's a relevant sort of point. So if you want to talk about, I don't...
The Hitler thing.
I just want one piece on that. There are people who would argue that maybe she was not an organized person and was not a good executive in that regard, right? But I don't know of anybody who came out publicly against Kamala Harris claiming that she was for Hitler, that she was against the Constitution, and that she was calling people who died on the battlefield on our behalf losers. Let's stipulate that.
Okay, let me address. So number one, I don't think Trump is for Hitler. Okay, I think that's absurd. Okay,
and you know
first of all,
why say it when you know that?
Hey, I get this.
What do you think about his generals?
I don't. Go ahead.
Maybe give me an hour.
I mean,
okay,
go
let's see
ahead.
how long it takes.
Please.
You know it's not true. Why say it?
So one, Trump's not for Hitler. Most of Trump's friends are Jewish. He grew up in the New York City real estate community. He's got a daughter who's Jewish. He's got grandchildren who's Jewish. He was probably the most pro-Israel president in terms of committing to do things and
So are the
actually
Germans.
executing on them.
what he said.
Moving the embassy, delivering the control of the Golan Heights to Israel.
By the way, I'm just asking the question.
He's
Hitlerian sort of Lebensraum.
The other thing that hasn't been...
Sorry, we have to say it. Lebensraum.
Yeah.
Which is, I forget how the exact definition, but basically what we called over in America, like room to move your arms.
Yeah, I think it translates like living space or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Elbow room, as James Fenimore Cooper called it over in the Americas, as we were dispossessing the natives. It's not a surprise that, taking territory in war, there's a through line here. It's very, I think, historically difficult for a lot of people to understand on the surface of it. But yeah, like when you have somebody like Bill Ackman, you understand how this happens, where Trump is a documented sort of Nazi curious person.
When he first ran for president, he went to I forget when this was. I mean, again, he's been running for president for nearly 10 years at this point. But he went to a group of Jewish donors, and he's basically said, you love making deals and all that kind of thing. The dude has, I mean, his father was arrested at a Klan riot in the early 20th century in New York City, in Queens. Like, it would not be a shock that a younger Donald Trump would be reading Hitler speeches, given his lifelong fixation on trying to prove his father wrong and maybe trying to be like him in certain ways. We don't need to psychoanalyze this guy any more than we already have. But I mean, I do want to just put out there for everybody what Bill Ackman represents here. He is dismissive of Donald Trump's clear red flashing anti-Semitism, I love Hitler, authoritarianism kind of thing. Because look at what he did for Israel. He delivered the Golan Heights.
Because of nationalism.
You see? Because apparently that's pro-Jewish people, according to Bill Ackman. I would argue that continuing to tie Jewish identity to the Zionist project only furthers anti-Semitism. Now, I don't know if Ackman's ready to have that conversation, but at the very least, you should be, if you're a liberal Zionist watching this, and apparently there are a few well-known liberal Zionists that watch this program, one in particular. If you are still out there and you're basically saying that people who are anti-Zionist are anti-Semitic, look at how one of the most public, well-financed by himself Zionists out there is defending the guy who praised Hitler and Hitler's generals because of his defense of Israel. That says everything you need to know, because it's not about Jewish identity.
It's about nationalism.
At the end of the day, it's about colonialism, it's about expansionism, and it's about billionaire ghouls like this guy wanting to take all of the territory in what operates as Greater Israel, but is really the occupied West Bank and the open-air prison that is the Gaza Strip. And when we're talking about historical parallels, you see the images coming out of northern Gaza as they continue to push Palestinians together into these very tiny portions of the Strip. And you can't help but think about the Warsaw Ghetto, in my view.
Of course, Sam was talking about that when you were out.
Oh, there we go. Where, and the rebellions, by the way.
Yep.
But the concentration of a group of people and putting them on a diet and starving them as they did in Warsaw. And then there was a part 2 to that. And when I see Palestinian men being driven out on trucks with their hands bound behind them, shirtless, and they're blindfolded, what do you think is happening next?
Yeah, it's extermination. And I mean, people like Bill Ackman, liberal Zionists, have gotten a lot of mileage out of the on the surface contradiction of Jewish people and Nazis. When you put it as Zionists and Nazis, there's actually a historical precedent to this. You can search the Havara Agreement, which I agree with like Hassan that it's not great to overemphasize things like that. But nationalism is the problem here. And Bill Ackman is doing Hitler apology for Donald Trump because Donald Trump is the greater supporter of Israel in this election.
Exactly
and
right.
It's a close race.
Yeah. Not as close as I think the media is making it, in my view. I mean,
well, that's what's funny.
I have a whole nother rant about the media is very invested in. It's such a close race. Tune in to our 24-hour countdown clock to Kamala Harris's town hall. Like, I mean, we got to be a little bit honest about the incentives for the media in terms of making this into the... And on the surface, I get it. There are a lot of polls that say it's exactly close. But in terms of there's also a lot of pollsters who were really embarrassed by 2016. And then in 2020, there were issues with the methodology because the people that were being called were all the folks that were more willing to answer the phone in 2020 were more likely to be Democrats because they were isolating during COVID, and Republicans were out and about. But they still got things right. It's just that they thought Biden was going to win by a wider margin. A lot of experts think they're overcorrecting in the way that they did in 2022 for Republicans. So, but I mean, knocking on wood.
I hope you're right about that. Well, one other point I wanted to make about it's weird, like their party is like both supporters of Israel, right? We know this. Yeah. It does seem like the Republican Party is like, I've always sort of like thought like, okay, the Republicans are Likud and the Democrats are Labor. Yeah. Right. This whole thing that we got going on, you start to see a little bit of the liberal Zionists starting to be like, oh, we have to be a Likud.
Yeah.
Like that's the logic of this. That's, I think, some of the stuff we're seeing in the streaming space is some liberal Zionists are realizing actually Likud, the thing that I believed, actually those fascists like were the ones more clear-eyed about what it takes to actually do this, which is bloodshed and violence and using any provocation to ethnically cleanse a population out of an area. And the liberal Zionists were just in sort of a fantasy land. And now,
but they're choosing.
But they're choosing now. And I think, you know, it's not a surprise to me that certain people would break toward Likud as opposed to anti-Zionism. And it is a goddamn shame on all those people.
It really is. And I just I know. Oh, hello, Brandon.
Our guests. Let me bring them.
We'll bring those guys in, but I've been coughing the whole time, so don't worry about it. But I just want to make this one final point there. Like, this is where the rubbers meet in the road here for liberal Zionists. And as Matt says, a lot of them are choosing to basically go down the Likud path as opposed to deal with this inherent contradiction where it's like, you know, the Holocaust is one of the greatest crimes in the history of humanity. We also committed genocide in Africa. A lot of Europeans did. In America.
Maybe one of the greatest by raw numbers, depending on how you tot it up.
Exactly. But I mean, even like the Dutch genocide in Africa, where over a few 2 decades or something, where they killed like 10 million people. Like we don't have that same cultural memory about that, right? And I think a lot of liberal Zionists, they felt that because of the abject, unspeakable, but we speak about it. We have to crime of the Holocaust and what that meant for Jewish people, that they've kind of constructed because of that trauma, an imagery of a self-conception of themselves as inherently anti-racist because they were the victims of one of the worst genocides in the history of humanity. But what liberal Zionists need to contend with is that that's not actually the case right now, because anti-Muslim bigotry in this country is bipartisan. And with liberal Zionists and with Zionists broadly, it's actually more pronounced. And so I think what's hard for liberal Zionists is that, I always voted Democrat. I always supported Black Lives Matter. I did all this kind of stuff that was easy for me as a Democrat, as a liberal within the context of the United States. But I think it really is cracking at the foundation of a certain self-identity to say, like, but actually, though, you are racist, unfortunately for you.
Because
what you went through in the Holocaust doesn't mean that you don't have to contend with that. And it's not just Zionists. We have anti-Arab and anti-Muslim racism in this country. Basically, it's the most broadly acceptable form of bigotry that I can think of, because both sides of the aisle engage on it on a regular basis. And liberal Zionists, as Matt is saying, they basically decided, some of them, okay, I'm just going to lean into the racism and say that the people calling it out are the real anti-Semites and bigots. And unfortunately for them, it may feel good for them in the short term, but history is not going to be on their side.
Yeah, and just one, I know we're talking a lot on this, but like and people have multiple identities, including overlap of both of these, but what the Holocaust meant for Jewish people and what it meant for Zionists are two different things.
Yes.
And that contradiction is appearing before our eyes right now. And, that's why it's, I think all of the anti-Zionist leaders that we're seeing, like those people are showing the way. And this is a moment right now where people need to reckon with this thing. And there are a whole bunch of people who want to stand in the way of those people having a clear view of like what's just in this world. And I think they're going to lose. And they can be more and more hysterical in the coming months and they can be in our chat as much as they want. You're losing, guys.
Exactly. And who isn't losing are our winners over here, our guests for the. This is how you call. This is what a transition looks like, folks. We are in the winning circle. Thank you very much. I'm a professional broadcaster. Matt and Brandon, hello guys.
Here's Bradley, Brandon, and Matt. Yeah.
It's a crosstalk.
I'm getting over the flu, so apologies if my voice sounds a little odd. Brandon, what's happening on the discourse?
Well, we have a new episode out for patrons on the Patreon.
Man, you're muted.
Oh, I'm not supposed to be, am I?
No, you're
Still
back.
Muted?
You're back.
Okay.
It was just a lag. Yeah. It was just a lag. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So I have a new episode out for patrons on the Patreon, as well as I will be uploading the first or third and second streams that I did on Twitch. And then we'll also be doing some more Twitch streaming tomorrow and or maybe Saturday. So follow me at Pretty Bad Lefty on Twitter/X, the Everything app, to find out when that's going to be.
All right. The Everything app, exactly.
The Everything app.
Where you go for inherently to watch videos. Duh. I mean, isn't that totally intuitive?
It's where I go for everything from like Nazism to neo-Nazism.
Broad spectrum. Matt Binder, what's happening on Scam Economy, Doomed, Leftist Mafia, all your shows?
Yeah, sure. So Leftist Mafia tonight, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time at youtube.com/Matt Binder. And last night I've been doing a lot of call-in shows lately, sort of just waiting out the election, like before getting into anything more meaty and diving into other things. So just, had call-ins and had one very interesting call that turned into a debate. I still don't know if the person was serious or if they were playing devil's advocate as they were claiming, but I had someone who called in to debate, Israel's right to defend itself. That was very interesting. So if you're interested in hearing that and my responses to them, youtube.com/Matt Binder.
I do love, the childish nature of Zionism. Like, they love to anthropomorphize this nation state. And it's like, I don't really think that nation states have character.
They're
but
surrounded by
go for it.
enemies.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why? First of all, like, what is it just the religion, or did maybe an exclusive nationalism cause that? And maybe that wasn't the best safe space for Jewish people after the World War II. Maybe we should have just maybe allowed them to say have refugee in America. But
And you know how America ensured that it wasn't surrounded by enemies? We committed mass genocides so that we could control the entire territory from the Pacific to the Atlantic.
I wish I had a sound drop of the what's that? Not the emo, not Fall Out Boy, the other emo band.
Panic at the Disco.
Panic at the Disco, because there's one line was Manifest Destiny.
Yes.
It'll really always like amaze me to see, especially this. Obviously, this comes from any sort of pro-Israel or Zionist type, but it always will amaze me when a U.S. official says this. It's when they say something like, the IDF is the most moral army in the world, or Israel is the safest place for Jewish people. It's like, you're literally throwing America, United States of America, your own country, that you represent under the bus. We don't have the.
Biden said that. He said there would not be.
The IDF is more moral than the U.S. Army, you're saying?
Yeah, well, when you have to say it over and over again, you know that you're like, it must be legitimate. But like, Biden said that. Biden said that without Israel, there wouldn't be a safe place for the Jews in the world, or Jewish people in the world. It's like, what are you trying to say about the country that you're the president of, you moron?
I mean, I agree. America is very anti-Semitic, culturally, and also our politicians. And a lot of that anti-Semitism is manifested as supporting Israel, funny enough.
Exactly. 100%. We'll talk about more of this in the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.